I'd like to officially call to order the November meeting of the ICA for Harrisburg. All board members are present. Neil is present. I can't tell if Mark is here.
Yes.
He is here. Oh, there you are. Sorry, Mark. And our general counsel, Jeff Engel, has told us he will be late, likely about 4:30 or so. Jeff, you have your standard statement.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody, welcome to the meeting. Before we get officially started, it is a public meeting. It will be recorded. Copies of the meeting will be placed on our YouTube page after the meeting is concluded. So just remember, everything we say will eventually be on YouTube. And if there are any questions or comments during the meeting, please feel free to use the chat feature to send them to me, and I will make sure that everybody's questions are answered if possible at the end of the meeting. With that, I will turn it over to our chairperson, Audrey Carter.
Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the October meeting. They were shared with everyone by Jeffrey, and I hope that you've had a chance to review them. If I could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
A second.
Any corrections, questions, observations? If not, I'd like to ask for votes on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. Jeffrey, would you give us the status of the financial situation of the ICA, please?
Sure, let me bring up my bills paid report, which was shared with all the members prior to this meeting. Give my computer here a second. This is the bills paid report through today, November 18th, 2020. You will notice that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 invoices paid in the calendar month. The starting balance at the beginning of the period was $104,729.46. The ending balance at the end of the period was $100,040.46. And we have interest earnings year to date of $18.50 in our account. If there are any questions, anybody wants to know anything, please let me know. Otherwise, this report will be included with the minutes.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We'll move into the chair's report, and I just wanted to share a couple of comments before we move into the open conversation of the city's 5-year financial plan. Jeffrey and I were lucky enough to participate in the Philadelphia ICA's annual fall conference today. We were enlightened by speakers sharing national, state, and local perspectives. I learned much, but came away with one overwhelming assessment shared by all of the speakers. We are living in a world of uncertainty that is shaking up all levels of government. At the same time, it shakes our citizenry to the core. There are trends, and some of them are positive, but by and large, they all end up with uncertainty. When will the pandemic end? When will the vaccine be available? Will people go back to work? Will they want to go back to work in the way they have in the past? Will there be more stimulus money? Will forecasts hold? One of the observations of changed individual habits that is a positive, I think, is an increased level of savings, likely born of the same sense of uncertainty and wanting to be prepared for whatever lies ahead. Less spending means fewer revenues coming across all levels of government. How does that translate on how government should look ahead? There's no concrete answers except perhaps to be as conservative as possible. Last month, Jeffrey also shared an article from the ICMA, which I didn't know was the leading association of local government professionals, which explores the 10 common outcomes of COVID-19 on local governments. And if you've not read it, I commend it to you. And I'm sure we can put a link on the web so others can read it as well. The 10 examples shared illustrate how local governments are adapting to their operations to the new fiscal and service constraints, trying to survive. again in this new age of uncertainty. We're now going to move into the discussion of the mayor's 5-year financial plan. We got a letter from Neil on behalf of the mayor that has asked the authority at the ICA to treat the document that we received on October 30th via email from Neil Woolley as a draft. And so that will not change our discussion that our members have right now. It will change as to what we move for action after the discussion. And what I would like to do is open discussion, but Neil is here somewhere. Neil, while we're talking, could you consider think about the timeline that you would like to suggest so that when we do come to the point of action, we can also put a timeline on that. So I think we're going to, everyone has had a time to think about this, to review it, and I appreciate all of your collective willingness to expedite this because we didn't need to respond before October 30th, but we are moving into a time where it just seems like there's going to be a deluge of everything. So it makes sense to try and get a response to the city as soon as possible. And one of the ways that I thought we might communicate back to the city are the buckets that are in the letter that we sent to the mayor in April. And those buckets are financial projects, planning discussions, capital budget, community and economic development, staffing and workforce strategies, and then a category of specific issues. We don't have to talk about them right now in that order, but I'm just going to ask Jeffrey as he collects all of these that when we pull them together, those might be good buckets so that it makes sense to the mayor, to Neil, and to Mark and others as they review the questions, concerns that we share. So I open it up to everyone. Kathy, Ralph, Doug, Mark, Neil. Who's first?
I suppose I'll take first run. I'll start by saying I think it was a good report, a good draft, and I appreciate the clarification that we are working on this as a draft, although I think that's the point of view that most of us had taken on its receipt, that we wouldn't simply take it in and vote it today and move it along. And so I think it's a positive indication that the mayor's looking for commentary that we can include to provide some further clarification and to elaborate on a number of the points in the plan. I'm not going to go into great length. I think the assumptions year-over-year growth were largely supportable. In terms of percentages assigned, I think though some of that is going to be contingent, as I think we all recognize, on how we reemerge from the COVID issues. I note that most of the fund areas and expenditure areas in the plan are pushed off well into 2021, and in some cases into 2022, and I think that's a fair presumption to make. I think there's still a handful of concerns. Probably my largest concern is the year after this plan. Obviously doesn't have to be taken into account directly in this plan, but it's there, and that is the financial cliff on the expiration of the extraordinary tax bases. And so I think a little bit more attention probably needs to be paid to that. It is acknowledged in good detail in the prefatory comments, and I think there is one sentence bolded in the draft somewhere around the debt service section, I believe, that emphatically makes the point that a lot of what's in here is contingent on what happens in the out years. But there's a couple of different strategies. One is whether the legislature is going to authorize some continuation or whether the legislature is going to act more comprehensively on municipal tax bases overall. And I think both of those are at best outside odds. And so then I think a little bit more attention needs to be paid to what we do to grow the revenue base here in the city. And that's something that we've talked about in other contexts relative to a more holistic, comprehensive economic development plan. The couple specific points that I want to raise are relative to staffing. Both of them relative to staffing. The first is it's acknowledged at the beginning of the plan of the steps that were taken during the COVID crisis to reduce the staffing complement, to reduce some of the staffing costs. It also notes the effect that people's aversion to seeking health care has had on a positive effect that it's had on the city's self-insured health plan. I believe at our last meeting, Neil had talked about beginning to refill some of the staffing positions that have been left vacant during COVID. I think that's something that I think we need to address a little more clearly in the plan itself, to both acknowledge what the short-term effect has been and then how that plays out in the staffing projections that are included. The other staffing area that I just throw on the table right now is relative to the post-employment benefits. And the plan talks about the city putting in place the OPEB trust prior to the end of the year. A little bit more detail on that will be good, but since it's such a short timeline until the end of the year, that might be something we're talking more about in real time than actually reflecting in the plan. But the other thing that I think would be helpful is some projections on contribution. The city's more or less pay as you go right now. The trust in part addresses that, but it would be helpful to see what the actuaries are projecting for some of the numbers, and then also what the projections might be relative to the changes in the employment agreements that sever the post-employment benefits for new hires after a certain date. Obviously, that's something that has a very long tail to it because that has its net effect after the current employees turnover, and then more particularly as most of them work their way through retirement years. So that's my quick couple shots to get started.
Thanks, Doug. And people can chime in and really make it a conversation as well. I don't feel like I want to put everyone on the spot like I just did, Doug. So feel free to chime in, add things as you hear your colleagues say them.
Well, if I could just follow up on a couple of the points with Doug just raised, just so everyone's aware of where things are. When the mayor basically gave an order freezing everything, I think the same day the governor closed everything. I forget the number of open positions. Once that was lifted in July, departments were allowed to start advertising again for the position. So they have been filling them. They're just not all filled. For example, my office still has 2 open positions. They're just, some of them are very difficult to fill, which is something we encounter frequently in the city. We've had people that have retired in the interim, I think in part because of COVID. We've had people that didn't want to come back and inspect buildings because of COVID and have gone on. And so we've had other openings. We did furlough people in the spring, and the mayor's position was, as long as people are furloughed, no one's hiring anyone. He's not going to have furloughed city employees not being able to work and hiring new people. So once the furloughs came back at the end of June, they were basically all codes inspectors who are now allowed to go back and enter houses again and commercial premises again to do inspections. So the authority is to go ahead and hire any approved position city council had in the budget. I mean, that's the authority. Doing it in reality is always the challenge. On the OPEB trust, we do have a considerably large package of materials In reality, the receiver, the state, and ourselves have all had different expertise council look at that package. And it is now out for final drafting to one of the firms here in the city who has appropriate pension and tax expertise to put it together. In the front of our annual audit now, we are required, as is everyone, to make an OPEB projection. So there is an annual OPEB projection, which is astronomically larger than any money that anyone has, which I think is pretty common. It is definitely six figures when it's there, and it has a very long life to it. The 3.5, I believe, or 3.3 million that's in the trust fund is a start for it. I think the question is going to become, and we're waiting for some guidance, because a board is appointed over the trust, who are the trustees, and whose role it is to make that determination about how that money even gets utilized. Like there's no given formula. So to answer Doug's question, I think some of that's still to come. And the three unions have a seat at the board by the court order that exists, not just the city. And so, there are discussions to come. We have kept the unions in the loop that, the board is coming, and they will have to appoint someone who will be in a fiduciary capacity, sitting there. And I'm not sure that gives Doug the clarification he's looking for. I hope it does. But that's sort of my thumbnail sketch of where we are.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I was just suggesting to a little bit of clarification on some of those points in the plan might be helpful.
Okay.
And I think Neil, we're not putting you on the spot. I think this is also just trying to get some consolidated thoughts from us to make sure that we're unified in our outreach to you rather than haphazard. Kathy had her.
Madam Chairman, I would agree with virtually everything that Member Hill raised. There were a couple things in here that concerned me, and part of it goes back to your comments about being very, very conservative at this point, because we really don't know what's coming in from revenues within the city, and my expectations are still very limited that the legislature is going to want to throw much money at us, given the problems that the state itself is anticipated to have. I noted in several of the items there were increases in budgets, and I would want to very carefully look at those increases in any line item. I saw two departments that I perceived to be small that were in the area of $100,000 increase or something in that vicinity by the end of the 5-year plan. And clearly that's a concern to me at a time when I think we've got to be belt tightening rather than belt loosening, if you will. It would be helpful to me to know what the estimates are in terms of the actual contractual requirements through the collective bargaining agreements. I'm sure that's out there somewhere, but if somebody could put that together for us to say in some of these departments, we're going to need X just to satisfy the collective bargaining agreements, I think that would be very, very helpful. I'm excited to hear that we're moving along on the actual establishment of the trust, because it's going to take some time to get that up and functional and available to really start looking at those issues. I would also mention that I would like to see more in terms of the accounting guidelines being adopted so that they will remove the auditor's previous exceptions to the budget. It seems to me that that may be something that can't be a one-step approach where we go from what we have now to satisfying that, but at least if we could talk about attempts to get in compliance on those accounting standards, that I think would be very, very helpful. So that's kind of an overview of where I'm coming from, if you will. And I think conservatism, fiscal conservatism needs to reign on this particular 5-year plan because of the uncertainty that's out there.
I would definitely agree, Kathy. In fact, I think on the revenues for FY21, every category goes up. It is projected to go up, including parking, and we know that's likely not possible. Just a couple categories stay the same, and they seem to be the more minimal ones. And likewise, expenditures go up, are projected to go up over 10%, where we expect to end FY20. And there's not much explanation of where that 4 million goes, or 5 million if you assume that 1 million of it covers the savings that the healthcare will save us. So I think that's where some more definition and explanation would be worthwhile, so that we can have confidence, because everything going forward builds on those. The expense budgets seem to build on those, 1 or 2%, and the revenue projections go out the same way. So just wanted to support that, Kathy.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, let me know when I can give some
Okay.
comments here.
Please, Ralph.
Great. And Jeffrey, could I ask you to raise a hand if my microphone is causing problems again today?
It's spotty. It cuts in and out as you're talking. I can understand you talk slower maybe. And
Talking slower might be the biggest challenge of the day for me today. I have my colleagues know I have some newborns here, and I'm at home and trying to sometimes get a lot done in between diaper changes.
sounds good. What you're doing now is good.
My first comment would be to echo something that Doug had said regarding it being a good first draft. And I think, Kathy, that reflects, and Audrey, upon some of the same concerns that you raise. I think being able to see a generally good forecast of what the next 5 years look like in terms of the current trajectory of revenues and possibilities for expenses to increase, and I think it's really maybe sobering to see what that looks like in 5 years. And but it's a good draft, and I think it's good to frame the issues in a numerical sense that we want to help address over the upcoming years up to the next 5 years. So I think philosophically, I think there's two issues with the plan that I think require some really further thought. The first one, Doug, you mentioned, was a better look at community and economic development. I think the supporting economic growth and the growth of the tax base of the city is of paramount importance. And if it's unfair to say this, please, Neil or someone correct me, but it looks like there's, other than the organic growth taking place through natural increases in revenues, there doesn't appear to be any things that shift the curve in a way that really begins to accumulate a more than just organic increase in the revenues and more of a structural increase in revenues. And I think that's something that we really need to spend, like philosophically, I think we need to spend a lot of attention on that topic, and because that's really a desirable outcome for the city. The second one in the plan is kind of the flip side of that. I think an area that looks really actually alarming is the Neighborhood Services Fund. It shows the fund running a deficit through 2024, and then being at the end of 2024, essentially having been on the point of depleting its reserves, its fund balance, and to the point where the fund balance approaches zero at the end of the time period prescribed in the plan. I think that's, I think it's beyond concerning. And that's taking into account the fact that the plan shows cash conservation in the Neighborhood Services Fund by way of stopping the transfer of funding to the general fund, which is where the Neighborhood Services Fund gets its overhead from. So in other words, if I'm reading it correctly, it appears that taxpayers, through general taxes and other general fund style revenues, are essentially subsidizing the overhead of the Neighborhood Services Fund, which is still running a deficit and is on a trajectory to deplete its fund balance and approaching zero. I think that that area just really needs the utmost attention, and it needs it as soon as possible to try and change that trajectory and stop it from going straight down at a linear path and begin to pull that plane back up again. So maintain altitude. Aside from that, there were two areas that I think I would like to see some more specific explanation, really justification on, and they concern Kathy around the same comment you made around concern with expenses. The one is the head count. The plan that we've most recently this is a revision or update to the current plan has a head count of 462 positions, and this plan now shows 500 and gosh, what was the number that I had in there? 512. Let's see if I made a note on that here. 512 that are shown in this plan that this draft that we're reviewing. That's substantial increase, almost 10% increase versus the plan from just a year ago. So I think that needs more explanation and justification to see where that's coming from. And I noted that the vast majority, virtually all but a few of the increase in headcount and positions are not in uniformed personnel. They're in non-uniformed personnel. And in addition to headcount, the other area with a big variance from the prior plan is the CIP section, the capital improvements projects, and that area of this draft. And again, I think that's an area where I have, I think hopefully everyone would agree that we have some concerns with the presentation, and maybe even what's the process for coming up with categorizing, assessing, valuing the capital improvements. The list of projects appears to have changed, the number of projects, the values, the priorities from year to year, the amount projected this year versus what was in the plan a couple of years ago. And are these things that are the result of a pandemic, or are these things the result of the plan, taking a sudden change? And I think it deserves a lot more attention. They're big dollar amounts. The city does not have has far from infinite reserves, and capital spending is once and done. So I think we certainly want to know that that we're on top of that issue collectively, and that the capital spending is being done rigorously with a good sense of cost consciousness, with sense of planning and prognostication that's taking place to make sure that the funds are being budgeted and spent in the most fiscally prudent manner. So I think those are very, very long-winded way of touching upon 4 points, which echoes several of the other comments. And I want to add to that neighborhood services fund, which is highly concerning. And so those are my broad comments. And I'll just note, and Neil, I did email you some questions that are really more ticky-tacky related to some of the content of the plan itself, which are maybe I won't repeat those here for the meeting. I think those are something more just to look at some of the text in the draft itself, and some either problems I have reading it, or potentially clerical errors or discrepancies that can be addressed during the drafting process. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Oh, thank you. And again, this is supposed to be a discussion, so please don't thank me.
A monologue, really. I apologize if that was.
No, not at all.
Were there any periods there, or was that all semicolons on my part?
I go back to something that Doug said as well, is that there's no consideration of what we're doing to prepare when and if the extraordinary taxes end. And I think that again goes back to Kathy said, practice fiscal conservatism. I think it was Ralph at one point, probably at the very end, had his calculator out and figured out that it was only something like a 1 or 2% growth year over year that we would get us to where we needed to be in the revenue side. And so if we balance that even with 1% growth and 1% expenditure reductions, we should be getting somewhere, even if it's not all the way there. And it is in the act, one of the things that this plan is supposed to consider and contemplate is how that needs to be done. And so we just encourage some exploration of that. I know there's 1 or 2 lines, but I do think it's more important than just 1 or 2 lines. I would also echo Ralph's. There seem to be several places where it's inconsistent as far as numbers that are used, totals that are used. And so we just want to clean that up because and we want to help with that, which is why we're, I think, bringing all these forward, and we'll transmit them in written form so that they're easier to digest. Are there other areas? I know that I see Larry on the line here, and I want to thank him because I finally figured out where 1 million of the cost increase in the plan went, which is the community aid program that was written up by the Berg. So that helped explain a little bit. And so I think that's something that should be flushed out a little bit more in the plan, especially relative to timing, performance measurements, goals, implementation, all that sort of thing. Jeffrey.
I think you and I had discussed, Madam Chairperson, that one of our concerns, and I don't want it to not get on the record today, had to do with the analysis of the Steelton relationship. And because we thought that part of our charge in the act was to encourage intermunicipal relationships that are to the benefit of the city. So hoping that perhaps we would have some sort of statistical measure that would show both the net revenue after additional expense to show that this was a positive move by the administration to start bringing Steelton into the trash collection, and then use that as a model for other intergovernmental relations that could be possible. So I don't know if you wanted to add that to your comments.
It can be your comment, but yes, you're right. You and I did talk about that. And I think it's really important as we begin to hear that there's additional considerations. I think of bringing Paxtang and Pembroke on. I may have my P's wrong, but again, I think you need to learn from your experience, figure out what worked, what didn't work, how you can make it work better. Hi, Jeff Engel, you made it.
Hi. Did we start the meeting? Or are we done with the meeting?
No,
Yeah.
We're in the middle. We're just discussing the 5-year financial plan comments by the board members.
Okay.
So that's where we are. We haven't talked about you.
We can go back to just a couple
Do you
of
want me
other,
to leave? And
no, you can say. Just a couple of other comments from my list, Madam Chair, is I echo Ralph's overall concern about the capital improvement plan. And I've discussed this previously, trying to get a sense. I know it's somewhat overwhelming, and that's part of the problem, a sense of the infrastructure needs of the city, at least in the near term, as opposed to just a list of projects, which is excellent and you should have. It's also trying to grasp, because it's sort of the need for infrastructure investment, things that are coming down the road especially in the 2, 3, 4, 5-year timeframe, which could be some significant investment needs that are looming, that obviously the city and the administration have this, they are cognizant of what they're up against, but I think it's important in a 5-year financial plan to articulate what that looming infrastructure investment need might be, which is beyond the 5 years of projects that they could reasonably invest in, but there are other things that may be beyond their ability, but I think it should be in the 5-year plan. So by not having that full view in the plan, it doesn't properly demonstrate the horizon on capital investment. So that's one of my concerns, and I've articulated that in the past, which I think is where Ralph is getting to in his concern about the projects that we do see. We've always said that if it's something that the city is up against, then we should know about it. And then we can work together as a team to try to address whatever challenges are facing us. And then my last comment is something that obviously has come up many times in ICA meetings, which is having to do with community and economic development and strategies for growing organically the revenues of the city. Clearly, there needs to be not only a linear growth, which seems to be included in the document and the numbers, but also a strategy for what can the city do, what kind of investment can they make, what kind of partnerships can they enter into that would actually grow the revenue of the city further than a straight linear organic growth, so that we can start to work together as a team towards that end. And I know that's something that the ICA board has brought up several times as being a priority. So I think that I'll put that note on the record as well.
Going back to the conference that I mentioned that Jeffrey and I listened today, the Philadelphia budget director was on. And one comment that struck me was that she said she really appreciated the discipline that the 5-year planning process enacted or exacted, maybe was what she'd say, on the city is really good, because all of us can get lost in what needs to be done today and the near term. And so I hope there's a little bit that the city might see that this is a benefit as far as, seeing how we move forward. Any other comments? And I know we'll share others, because there are ones that I think we've been selective in what we're bringing up, and the little one-offs, we're not going to talk amongst ourselves, but we can send those to Jeffrey and he can collate them.
My pleasure. We did get the comment letter from the controller's office.
Yep, I was going to comment on that once we finish with this discussion. But since you segued into it, Charlie, we did ask for an opinion on the plan from the controller's office, and let's see if I can concisely summarize. I think they felt okay with the assumptions. They found some issues with the actual numbers being used, and thus the forecasting based off those numbers. And then they too pointed out the precipitous cliff that we fall off in FY25, and thought that it was important to do the exercise of forecasting that. I guess it would be the 6th year. Did I miss anything? But I really appreciated Charlie and Bill and Michael work really hard and take it very serious. And so instead of just a note, we got wonderful graphs and forecasts, I think 4 different charts or 3 different charts that validate their overview. So if we're finished with the conversation, I'll pause for a second if there are any other comments people want to make. The next decision would be, and this is what I asked Neil to talk about or to think about, is that we're moving forward, and I think the action that we need to take is to accept the city's request to treat this as a draft, to share our thoughts with them in collaboration, so that we can get to a date where they would submit their final 5-year financial plan to us to review. Does that capture what we would want to vote on now? Am I missing something? Jeffrey, you're always good in motions.
Yeah, I do. I would be interested in what Neil's opinion as well, but my opinion would be that you should receive the draft and authorize me to prepare a response to the city, and then we could talk later on about when we're gonna deliver that response, because I think we're going to have a special meeting to deliver that, go through that Q&A. So that would be my thought. I don't know if you have a different thought on that.
I have a different thought,
Okay,
or a different understanding.
Okay.
What I thought was questions were coming after this meeting
Yeah.
yes,
to inform the presentation on the 2nd.
right. That's what
So,
I
but
said.
not having seen what the list is, it's very hard for me to predict how easy or difficult it is to answer the questions. Some of the concepts you're talking about in my ear are concepts as opposed to hard number things.
Mhm.
And some of them I think are drill downs in terms of the understanding of the role and the type of funding that we have for some things. I don't think any of that's a bad thing to everyone to understand, but those are a little more amorphous than fill in the blank and move this around, put in some more detail. So until I see them, I can't predict really well. I would hope, and the most optimistic is that by the time everyone sits down for a presentation together, that there's follow-up questions and the board is comfortable with what the mayor is presenting that day, and the mayor is comfortable with what the board's interests are and concerns, and that we get to, somewhere very quickly after that, an approved plan. But I've given up predicting things in the world, so I can't tell you that we'll be there on the 2nd. But that to me is but I don't think we would take much after the 2nd if there are things we can actually do. I don't anticipate that the mayor is going to come in and say, for example, I'm going to cut these things by 1% and change this by 1% without some, more detailed discussion on why that is prudent. I mean, and I will give you an example. I think this is really a difference of thinking of the board, its members, and, inside City Hall in terms of, the rank and file managers who are trying to make things happen and get money collected and do those things. The economic development, we agree, has to happen. I don't think people feel that they're being genuine when they predict a number for economic development. Like when you're saying make projections for it, it frankly feels like made up stuff. I think that's what it feels like. They can get their hands around the staff around, what they know, asking them to project things that are going to happen in the future, which isn't what they all do. They feel like you're asking them to fill in a blank that's not real for them, that they can't do. It's not that kind of forecasting. I'm not saying that the board is incorrect that that is an essential element. I think the question is, we even start with what is the measure, and is it a real measure or is it not a real measure? Those are the kind of discussions I think are valuable to have, to talk about expectations and what people are and clarifying some of those questions. I think we can get to real answers. I just think it is a communication framing question between the two.
And I would agree, and there are professionals that help with the developing economic development plans. But I think it doesn't, every question doesn't have to be answered in its entirety. But I think if it can be addressed as to what steps are moving it forward so that there is a measurement and a commitment to do it, I think that would help satisfy the members. So, I mean,
I think that's a fair statement. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think, if we looked at, I was looking at the calendar, and Neil, you said maybe he could be ready on the 2nd, but what if we picked a date like the 11th, which is the Monday after our Tuesday or Wednesday meeting, to expect that. And if for some reason it becomes insurmountable, then you would come back and ask for an extension.
From my perspective, that's fine. And hopefully we would be able to get there before we get to the 11th. The 10th is the budget vote, is my understanding, for the council.
Right.
So there is just a lot of focus on there's going to be 3 nights in a row of going through the budget in great detail and making amendments if there are any, and going through that. So it's going to be hard in that crunch to do what we're talking about. So my guess is the mayor's going to try and push for earlier. But if it's not then it gets to be probably not the 11th, but maybe the 14th or whatever. I'm not sure what day of the week that is. But a couple days to do it after he's done with the budget with the council. That tends to be a fairly consuming few days when for pretty much the entire staff.
Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion. I'd love to maybe just to clarify with Neil, if there's a date that we could set as a, to set as the new deadline to push back. I think October 31 was that the deadline that we previously extended. I'd be pleased to make a motion, Neil, if you have a suggested date to fill in the blank on that, to push back the deadline for the submission.
Why don't we do the outside date as the 14th?
I'd like to make a motion to extend the deadline for the city submission of its annual update to the 5-year plan, and extend it from the most recent date, which I think was October 31, to extend that to December 14.
Second, Madam Chair.
Any discussion alteration? At which point I might jump in just to perhaps make the amendment to capture what Jeffrey had suggested, that at the very beginning of your motion, could we say that the authority accepts the draft, will provide feedback, and perhaps we can give ourselves a deadline by, let's
Be very pleased to amend the motion if Kathy would like to keep her second to authorize Neil's request that the submission be treated as a draft.
and we will respond as quickly as possible. So motion
Kathy,
on.
you're on mute, Kathy.
Second, the revised motion.
All those in favor, or any discussion, sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. We will get that to you in writing, Neil, so that it can be reflected not only in the minutes, but in a letter to you and the mayor as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We talked about Charlie, so I'm just going to give another shout out, thanking him for responding as quickly to us. And all right, I've lost my order on my, sorry, I need to look at my calendar.
Okay.
The next thing, oh, that's why it's sad time. That's why I'm all lost. Unfortunately, today we have to say farewell to Jeff, who asked that he terminate his contract with the ICA effective tomorrow. We knew this was coming due to some personal commitments, and so we just hoped that the inevitable wouldn't come. We've had a fun run. Jeff has been a great partner. He won the ARM challenge and got to be called Jeff as opposed to Jeffrey. So we wish him well, and we will have many fond memories. And I told you I'd bring this one up. Poor Jeff, was it last spring or summer, was painting his porch and fell off. And the image is him clinging by his fingertips. And alas, no one came, as in the comics, to rescue him at the last minute, and he fell and broke his ankle. So Jeff, we have lots of other good memories too, and you have wonderful product that you have provided us with. So we appreciate that. I don't know if you want to say anything, otherwise I'll.
Sure. And again, Audrey, I appreciate you reviving the repressed memories. I thought I had forgotten that. No, I do appreciate everyone's collegiality that I've had with everyone on the board, as well as with Neil and the mayor. and certainly others that have participated in this meeting and the meetings in the past. I think that everyone that has either been on the board or is on the board now has a truly or has had a truly difficult job and are truly invested in the growth of Harrisburg. I'm, more than impressed with everyone's dedication. I know that this is, one of those jobs that your thanks will come to you at some point in the afterlife, but not now. So yes, it's with a great amount of regret and a heavy heart that I have to depart. Certainly, I am here as a resource for whoever fills my seat, and I stand at the ready to help them and give them all the files and whatever advice I can or will provide to them. But I regard each of you as a friend. Certainly, I've known Neil for a long time, but I'm impressed with everybody, including Dave and Tina, who were on the board previously. Jeffrey, if I missed somebody, you can remind me. I don't think I did, but no, thank you very much. It was quite the experience, and I'm glad I got to know you each a little bit better. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And so that leaves a void. We will be without counsel for a while as we search for a new special counsel. I don't think we'll miss a step, as the act says that we may retain special counsel. So I'm assuming, and fellow board members, please comment that we are good to go. And I would like to ask, because this person won't find him or herself, if Kathy and Doug would serve on an ad hoc subcommittee to work on the RFP, then work with Jeffrey to get it issued and commence the search, and know that Ralph and I will assist in any way possible, as will Jeffrey. Would you two accept that assignment?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Be happy to.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And
If you like that in the form of a motion, I'd be happy to do that if that would be required.
that, should we do it? Do we need a motion? Yes. Let's go ahead and do it just for safe backstop sake. Wait a
So
minute.
moved.
We need a motion to accept the resignation of our independent. Also,
I will make that motion.
Second.
Kathy will make a motion to accept the resignation or termination of Jeff's contract.
Yes.
A second? I'll second it. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Begrudgingly, aye.
All those opposed? You're not allowed to be opposed to this one. Call for a vote. Did I call for a vote?
that would be a motion to appoint the subcommittee to find the replacement.
Which
So
was-
moved.
Okay. Second,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. So we've got those both on the docket.
We're still on the hook for a few more hours, so there's not
Yes,
done
work them hard.
well. I'm gonna send them lots of work.
I just also, as we move along the agenda, I think Neil has already spilled the beans on the special meeting that we're going to have on December 2nd. The mayor has asked to, share with us at a public meeting, both the 5-year financial plan as well as the FY21 budget. And so that is set, did I already say this? Tuesday, December 2nd at 10 o'clock. And notice will be made in public as do all of our meetings. One question came up that we need to discuss with the board members. In order to make this meeting most effective, we're going to be faced with two major documents. We are not going to be in person, so we're going to be Zooming. And so in order to make it most effective, there are two options, or there's a hybrid. One is everyone has hard copies, or those of you who are lucky enough to have two monitors, you'd be able to follow along on one and participate in Zoom on the other. But I point out those two things because I have had too many issues with screen sharing on Zoom. And as we look at something this dense with small type, I feel like I don't know that I'd be able to absorb it all on screen. If you feel differently, I will make it work. But how do you, Kathy, Ralph, Doug, what's your best preference for working through something like this, real time? You okay with paper copies, or?
I'm okay with paper.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or even electronic and toggle back and forth between the screens.
Okay. So Neil, I think if we can get those, I will take responsibility for picking them up and delivering them.
Sure. I will work with Katie to make that happen.
Okay.
I will note the mayor probably will have a PowerPoint too. That'll be
okay. And
that's just typical. Yeah.
That PowerPoint is great because that's easy, but it's also relative to someone says on page 48.
Right.
We'll all have those at our disposal as well. I also wanted to, just as point of success, that Ralph and Jeffrey and I and Neil met and had a lively conversation as to re-energizing the agreement. So stay tuned on that.
I do want to point out for the record, Madam Chairperson, if it's okay with you, that that was a meeting where only two of the voting members were present, and therefore it didn't need to be a public meeting.
Right. Yes, it was just Ralph and me.
I don't count, so.
Oh, Jeffrey, you count. You count half. And I think now we move to the agenda item where Jeffrey is going to share, or has already shared. Did I mess up?
No, it's fine. I sent a copy of the 2021 proposed meeting schedule to everybody. It seems sometimes it feels like folly in the age of COVID to schedule a calendar a year in advance, thinking that I would somehow know what's going to occur in 2021. But regardless of that, it is sort of a standard move that boards do, and it is totally subject to change. So it's not something that's written in stone. On the other hand, we do publish it on our website. So with that, I've asked the board, it is our standard annual schedule, which means we would be meeting on the fourth Wednesday of every month in 2021, with the exception of August, where we would have no meeting scheduled, and November and December, where we would be scheduled to meet on the third Wednesday instead of the fourth due to holidays. So if everybody is okay with that as a template for next year's meeting schedule, I would require a motion approval from the board.
So moved.
Second. Was that Kathy?
Awesome.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Quick question.
Yep.
Just to clarify, then the motion then moves that to advertisement. That counts as our single ad for the year for
Yes.
open meetings purposes.
But that's a good question. Last year we didn't do a single ad. We did monthly, which sometimes was good because things changed. For example, if a meeting was canceled, you would then have to do a monthly ad. So I'll talk to whoever's eventually our new independent counsel about whether or not a single annual ad is better or worse. But we do put it on our website. So that's another reason. We put the whole year on the website. So people can
Good points made, and we're far enough ahead of the year end that we can get those questions answered. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chairman.
No, that's all right. And by the way, you still have Jeff tomorrow. Talk to him.
Oh, sure. Good.
The other thing I wanted to mention, which will be publicized as well as a public meeting, will be a joint meeting of the City of Harrisburg Audit Committee and the ICA to receive a report from the city's auditor. And that will take place on December 17th at 5:30 p.m. And it will be a Zoom meeting as well. Lots of public meetings for us. And then our December meeting is early. It's actually the 16th, the day before the audit meeting. So we'll get to see each other quite a bit next month. And we now move to other business. And I would like to bring up the first item of other business, and that is to introduce Marita Kelly, the Act 47 coordinator, who would like to introduce a colleague of hers to us. Marita.
Thank you, Audrey. I appreciate that. Yes, I would love to introduce Beverly Hutzel, who's been in the background on all our calls and paying it close attention. She is the new local government policy specialist for the Central Region. Prior to this, she covered another region, but Ann Morrow took another position at the department, and Beverly has successfully and completely taken on the Central Region, which includes, well, her region might be slightly different than mine, but it includes sort of like the center of the state. I call it the stem of the T. So welcome, Beverly, and sorry it took me a little while to get you introduced. I think either you missed one meeting or I missed one, and so I didn't mean to be rude, but I'd like everyone to welcome Beverly. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be able to participate, and I sit and I listen to all of you speak, and I realize, boy, do I have a lot to learn. So thanks for letting me be a part of this. I appreciate that.
Well, we're grateful to have you. DCED is always an amazing partner for the city, and Marita has been a colleague we've come to treasure. She's another one of us in the background. So welcome, Beverly.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other items of business that the board members would like to bring forth?
I don't know if Mr. Grover has any updates on outstanding city issues that he wanted to share with us.
There are a few things just for people's edification. We anticipate, I sent another email today, that we will have a final term sheet from AMBAC momentarily. Sometimes momentarily in the bond world is different than other worlds, but and if that is so, then we will be moving that to City Council for consideration with the budget. We anticipate, based on votes that happened last night in Paxdang, that they rejected the bids and moved to have an intergovernmental agreement negotiated with the city for sanitation. We anticipate both them and Paxdang and Pembroke will move forward. We will coordinate. I'm not exactly sure how, but because I'm not the one who crunches the numbers. Some of the questions that are about Steelton, there obviously is data there. There were some original projections and then the actual experience. And the first year had expenses in it, which we had budgeted in. I know that we had to provide cans and things like that along the way. But I'm sure Mark and the mayor have projections that they can walk through on some of that. But we expect, those agreements to move forward with City Council and services to start next year for those two other boroughs. And we consider that part of the regionalization discussions we believe local government should be doing. I know Paxton's already entered into a similar agreement, but with their police bureau with Swatara Township. You know, they're trying to expand as much as they can. We're in similar discussions with Swatara on other issues like their composting site and things like that. I think they're the major highlights of what's coming, you know, of what we're doing. And I may call certain people individually when I have questions. If the way I think sometimes is the way other people think, and sometimes need some explanation as to what the question is, just so I can get accurate as I can in responding to it. So, but feel free to reach out to me if there's specific questions, you know, on operational or big picture items in the city.
Thank you, Neil. And we've expressed this to you before. I think we really appreciate your willingness to be so forthcoming and sharing information. We really do see ourselves working very closely with the city and would hope to get at the front end of these discussions so that we know about them and can support them from their beginning. So know that we are there, and we'll call you too, Neil, if we have any questions.
Feel free. So,
okay. Any other points of business? If not, it's time for public comment. Have you received any, Jeffrey?
I received one public comment from Mr. Epstein, who asked a question which I think is best answered by the board. And it has to do with the resignation of Mr. Engel. And the question was if the board is permitted to meet without having an independent counsel present at the meeting. Let's see, why is it necessary for him to be present at board meetings? So it was obviously there was a choice at some point to have the independent counsel present, but it's not required. So why did the board intend to have independent counsel present at your meetings? I don't know if you would like to take that on, Madam Chairperson.
Well, I think certainly at the very beginning, there were 5 of us coming together and we were building the ICA from the ground up. So it was very important for us to have as many partners in the room as possible. And that included finding Jeff and finding Jeffrey. I think that while we haven't had any barn burner questions that have come up during the course of a public meeting, I think it is always good policy if you can have someone to whom you can turn immediately to get some advice so that you can move forward. So I think from my perspective, it's just a matter of good policy and provides us the opportunity to continue moving forward quickly. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else on the board has any other thoughts on the participation of the independent counsel in meetings.
I'll just add briefly, it's never good policy to put your counsel on the spot for an immediate opinion on something in the meeting, but it's helpful to have counsel there to understand the question in context as well, so that when they do the research, they know specifically what the baseline issue was, and so that's a good reason to have them present.
Thank you for that clarification, Doug.
And then the follow-up question is, are we?
Jeff,
Oh yeah, please.
And just a comment, and also I wanted to just add a shout out to our counsel, to Mr. Engel. I think the matters, really the weighty matters that the ICA is concerned with regarding the city's progress towards fiscal stability, and these are, I think, important matters. And I think having a valued, trusted advisor, fully up to speed and in attendance at our, by virtue of attendance at our monthly board meetings, I think has been, it's every one of Jeff, with your presence, every time you've been able to attend one of our meetings, it's been a pleasure, being able to meet with you, and it's been an honor serving here with you. So I do think it's been valuable given the weighty matters that I think that the ICA was, the act was enacted and the ICA was created to help address.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Audrey. Thanks, Doug.
Was that it, Jeffrey? I thought you had a second.
The question was a procedural question. We had appointed the committee to find a replacement, but the question is, do you believe that that there's a potential that you might have a replacement by the time we next meet for our next official board meeting, which is December the 14th, the 16th? And I think I know the answer, but highly unlikely.
Kathy's shaking her head.
Well, we aren't going to wait long to get started, but yeah, obviously you need time, and then any council that you engage also has some obligation to do conflict checks and all the rest of it to make sure they're able to serve appropriately. And so that takes a little bit of time.
And especially with the holiday in there, I think to project that we could get an RFP out that could then be answered in a timely fashion, and then the number of RFPs submitted, reviewed, is just pushing it too much.
And thank you again, Kathy and Doug, for taking that on.
If there are other questions, they can be asked to me after the meeting. I'd be happy to follow up on anything, but there will be an RFP. The last question.
Wonderful. So we come to the end of the meeting, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you again. It's great to see everyone. Have a wonderful, measured Thanksgiving, and I'll look forward to seeing you the week after Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Marita. Bye, Bev.